Welcome back. It's been a while. I think the last video I did was over a month and a half ago. So been busy. Was out of town, had the flu, and then had house guests for a month. So getting back into this, and hopefully we can get moving on our MMO here again. So today we're going to take a look at our first dungeon instance. So a lot of people have been asking for this one. I have a list of a lot of the stuff you guys have asked for, and we'll be covering that over the next few weeks. And at some point we're going to do another contest. So our gameplay abilities contest was really popular, and you guys did some great work, and we gave away a copy of OWS. So we're gonna do another contest at some point here. So, okay, we've had some changes to OWS, and so we're going to need to download the latest version for what we're doing today. This won't work on previous versions. And so we're looking at the March 2nd update, and so we're going to download that. And I already have it here. So as we always do, we will go into here, plugins, delete OWS plugin, come back here, right click, copy, back to here, and paste. So we'll let that copy. And we need to take a look at something else too. So you may or may not have this enabled, but at one point I was showing how to use the replication graph, and I've run into some problems. The replication graph's not ready for prime time. So I need to go in and temporarily disable it. So what we're going to want to do is going to config default engine, and we're looking for this line's right here. See this? Online subsystem utils, IPNet driver, OBS replication graph. We're going to dump that. We'll add it back later when it gets working a little bit better. Okay, cool. So we've got that, and let's launch the project. Got a few other things we need to take a quick look at. That'll fix most of it. So one of the side effects of that replication graph is that it was no longer calling isNetRelevant on our don't rep to owner actor, which was making our projectile show up twice, which we didn't want and caused a ton of other issues. So if your projectile is showing up twice, it's because of that replication graph doing what I just did to remove it. It's gonna get that not showing up twice again. So we definitely want that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come over here, and you'll notice there's actually, so this side was World 1, and this side here's World 2. And right here, we're going to create a cave. So we're going to create a cave right here, and then we're going to use that as the entrance to our dungeon instance. So the first thing we want to do is we want to click on the landscape, and I'm going to go to the landscape instance, and I'm going to go to the landscape here. And you want to make sure that you have this, landscape visibility mask, plugged into your opacity mask. You should have that from earlier, but if not, make sure that's in there. This next thing we do is not going to work. This is going to let us paint visibility so we can actually paint away a section of this. So then what we're going to do is we're going to come into our landscape and our sculpting and visibility. And we can just paint this away, see? And if you need to add it back, Shift, I'm holding down Shift and the left mouse button, and we can add it back. So anyway, we'll try something maybe shaped a little like that. So that's how you can add holes that we can walk through and turn into a cave. I have the Paragon props. This thing's massive. I don't know, it's like 18 gigabytes or something. You probably don't want to download this. So another good place to get cave rocks is actually the effects demo. It's much smaller and it has some nice rocks you can use to build this out. I'm going to just do something real quick here. Let's see if I can find the rocks. Those are not the rocks I'm looking for. Maybe it's under monolith. Yeah, there's the ones I was using. So, yeah, so that'll work for like a base type rock. So I'm gonna drop that down here. We're just gonna do something real quick. I'm gonna Control C, Control V. I'm gonna rotate it. See if I can get these to line up in a meaningful way. Something like that might work. Copy and paste. Later I'll probably come back in. Okay, so one of the really things that's useful here is going to lit and change it to unlit. Otherwise it can be really hard to work in the dark. I'm just going to do this ugly. You can take your time and do it the right way. I basically just need something. And for the purpose of this video, I'm not going to put sides on it. But yeah, you could use this other rock here and build up sides and a ceiling and do all that other good stuff. Okay. So we've got this. We're going to make it so that we walk in a little ways and we transfer to the dungeon. Now, you'll remember that we have this blueprint here called, actually it's under OWS plugin content. We got this travel map BP. That only works for traveling to world maps. So we're going to need to create a new one here. And we're going to call this, so new BP, actor. We're going to call it portal to dungeon instance. Okay, and let's see, we'll go to the event graph, and we're going to need to add a box trigger. So go down to collision, box collision, we'll call this trigger, and we'll go to the collision settings. And we want overlap all pawn, overlap only pawn. We can step up on it, and pile, save, and we're interested in on begin overlap. There we go. Okay, so let's start building this out. So we want to make sure this only runs on the server side. And I often use these as comments. In this case, this would run in both places, so this is actually needed. In other places, something only runs on authority, and I still put this in there just as a comment to remind me what it's doing, so that I can quickly look at it and figure out, hey, what's server side, what's client side. You know, another good method might be to add comments around it and do different colors, you know, because we could change the color on comments. So that might be another way to make that easier. Cast to OWS character. It's actually a character with abilities, but I usually only cast as far as I have to. And in this case, OWS character is far enough. Okay, we're going to create a variable, character reference, and we're going to change it to type OWS character. We'll then set this value. String, cast failed, OBS character, portal to dungeon instance. So we know where it's at. So there's probably other places that have that same thing. And then, let's see, so once we do that, we want to get the controller. We want to cast to third-person player controller. And we're going to need a player controller reference. Player controller reference. Third-person player controller. That. Copy this print string, and we'll just change that to person player controller. And then we need to use the character reference. Is transferring between maps and not and branch. This is to make sure it only fires once, because this I had this happen during testing. These overlaps, they'll just keep firing. So this is our latching system. And we'll do a print string. This thing's actually going to spam. Some point we may want to remove this, because since it's the latch, once it hits the latch, the thing's just going to spam the log. Okay, we want to create a variable called dungeon zone name, and it'll be a string. This is so we can use this for multiple portals. So this is going to be a reusable thing. And we're going to make that public, so we can set it. And then we also need dungeon spawn point. It's going to be a fixed value. And that's going to be public too. So now we will just add a safety check. Does not equal. Yep, and a branch. Just in case we forget to put that in, and we'll do a print string. Empty zone name. At this point, we'll latch. Set is transferring between maps. And we want to call an event over on the player controller, but we don't have it yet. So first we'll pull our player controller reference, and then we're going to need our dungeon zone name, and we're going to need our dungeon spawn point, but we don't have an event yet. So it's time to move over to our player controller. Okay, so we're going to create a new one here, a new event, custom event, and it stays on the server, so we don't have to do any replication. Transfer to dungeon. We just want to do the rest of this code over in the player controller. So we've got that, and it has some inputs. So it gets the dungeon map name. I'm going to pass these parameters over. And we also need dungeon spawn point. So now we've transferred control over to the player controller, and we're going to transfer to dungeon, going to call it. Okay, so we should be done there, and now it's time to come over here. Okay, so again, this is only really getting called an authority, but I want this here as a comment so I know what's happening. dungeon map name is already a value over here. And we need to set it. And dungeon spawn point is also a value. So I'm going to cache these over here because they're going to get used in another place where there's already some code. So we got to set those values. And once we do that, we want to create a function. And the function is going to be called isPlayerInParty, because we need to know. And we're going to send in, we don't have to send in anything, but the output is going to be player is in party of type bool. So it's going to be just a simple search. We've done this type of thing many times before. We're going to create a local variable. It's going to be called found a party. There are some built-in find methods you can use for arrays, but unfortunately with this structure it wasn't working right. So there's a new array here. This is part of the new system that's behind the scenes automatically caching these for you, so you don't have to worry about it. Each with break. Yep, we want to break once we find one. So then we're going to break the player group, and we're interested in searching. So we're going to actually pull this down here, drag this into it at the end, and that's going to come from the completed. But up here, we actually want to check, is the player group type equal to 1, because 1 is a party. And if it's true, we want to say, you know what, we found a party. So we'll set this to true, and then as soon as we do, we want to break. And if it loops through all of them and doesn't find a party, then found a party will still be equal to false and be returned. So that method's now all set to go, and we can call it here. Okay. And based on that output, it depends on what we're going to do. So if we're not in a party, then we need to call add player to group, because everyone has to be in a party to go into a dungeon, even if it's just a party of yourself. And the way we're going to do a player group name is we're going to do player state. These player group names have to be unique across all types. Player name. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use a string append. And we're going to create a name that starts with our player name, which is already unique. Player names have to be unique, character names. And then we're just going to do underscore party, right? So now that'll end up being unique, which is what we wanted. And then the character to add is right there, and the type is party. Here's the different types you can choose from right now. Okay, and that should work good. So then what we want to do is we want to create another custom event. I'll show you why in a second. We're going to call this transfer to dungeon player added to group. There's going to be a callback from this. The problem is we're already using that callback somewhere else. And so there's no way to say, okay, if we called it from here, go to a different one. They all go back to the same one. So to do that, what we have to do is we have to create, it's a little ugly, but it's not too bad. So we have to create a mode. And so I'm going to call this add player to group mode. We're basically going to set it before we call it, and then when we get our call back, we'll look at what we set it to, and then go back to that. And so as long as we don't use adding to player group overlapping two at the same time, which we're not going to do, then we're perfectly fine. And so what we're going to do, we're going to come here, we're going to set this mode, and you could set it to anything you want, but I decided to call it transfer to dungeon. And I'll show you in a minute why we need that. Obviously then, once we get over here, we want to clear it because we're no longer using that mode. We're just using the clear mode, which is the default. And then we're also going to jump over here. I'm going to use a reroute node. I'm going to jump over to here. If we were already in a group, then we can continue. We don't have to do this whole thing. And so we'll just come back over here. I also do want to throw in, again, just as a reminder, that this is only running on authority. It's not going to run anywhere else, but just as a reminder. Okay, then we want to do owning client show loading dialog. I made the mistake when I was first doing this to just do show loading dialog. Show loading dialog on a server does nothing. So you got to make sure it's the owning client variant, so it'll make RPC call back to the owning client to tell them to display it. Get controlled pawn, cast to character. That's all I needed to go for this one because I just want to get disable movement. This is the same thing. If you look, all this stuff I'm doing here is the stuff that we're doing in the normal portal. We show the loading dialog. We stop you from moving further forward. And now we're going to call launch dungeon. And there's a new option here now when we launch a dungeon that says, what kind of group? There's also a no group option if you don't want it connected to a party. And we're going to grab that dungeon name and drag that here. Okay, so the part that I was talking about with the mode, we got to take a look at this. So this add to player group, it calls something called notify add player. Event notify add player to group. But look at this, it's already used, right? So it's already going to go here and go to this, and we're like, well, we don't want to go there because that's for the other party system, which will end up... That was weird. Okay. Which we'll end up replacing eventually. But for now, I don't want to mess it up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use our mode. And so we're going to take this. We're going to basically say, is it equal to... Remember, the mode was called transfer to dungeon and a branch. And so if it's false, it's going to go do this. But if it's true, it's going to go call that transfer to dungeon player added to group. Right? So we know that, hey, the player was successfully added to the group. So anyway, that's what we're using that that mode for. Because it's a callback. We're just saying where we want it to come back to. Okay. That looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Okay. We now need to add this new portal to dungeon instance here. And we'll move it a little bit further in. And we'll expand it. So, I don't know, maybe 15 and 10? It's probably good enough for now. And then what we have to do is we have to tell it, we're going to call this our first dungeon. Okay? And we're going to need to go create that. So I'm logging in here. And I already have one created, but what you want to do is you want to go to the zones, and you want to hit add zone. Okay, so you can fill this out. And this is the one we did here. So we're putting our first dungeon as the UE4 map name. That has to map what's in UE4. Also, it's 1-to-1, so we put the same thing in zone name. We pick dungeon instance here instead of world. These two values are not used, and I'm saying it's a 5-man dungeon, so we're plugging those in. And you'll want to add that, and so once you have that in there, now we'll be able to use that. So we actually have to create that map. So we're going to go here, and we're going to say new map, and we're going to call it our first dungeon, and be careful to spell it the same. And what I'm going to do in this dungeon, save, is I'm going to go back to our rocks. Find our rocks here, Paragon Props, Monolith, Rocks, and Meshes. So I'm going to drop this down. Rotate this. Okay. And again, later we can come and, you guys can go and make this look a little bit better. I'll probably I try not to do stuff off screen, but I probably will just do some meshes and stuff. So anyway, I'm just trying to create some floor for our dungeon here, and we can grab some rocks for the dungeon walls. There we go. Rotate this. Okay. You get the idea. And so what we're going to do is we need to know where to spawn in. So I usually just drop an empty. So we want to spawn in right here. So what I'm going to do is someone showed me that you can go here and you can hit right click and hit copy. And now we're going to go back over to, remember it's down here in world comp, our world. And here's this, and dungeon spawn point, paste. So now it'll spawn us to the right place. And then I'm going to go back to the map because I want to show you there's a problem. And we're going to kind of cheat for this one. So the reason we were able to see stuff is because we're in unlit. As soon as we go to lit, everything's dead. That's because we don't have any lights, but the lights would be weird. So what we're actually going to do, it's good we went to world settings because we actually have to come here, pick third-person game mode. And we also, so we don't get the chat thing spamming us, we have to drop our chat manager BP in world, and we have to set it to actor hidden in game. And then we'll come back to world settings because I want to go to light mass, and we have this environment color. And so we can cheat here. We'll kind of pull that up a little bit. And we'll actually use baked. We'll actually use baked lighting, build lighting. And this will make it so at least it's not totally dark. Now it still has some weird things to, anyway, we're just doing something temporary here just to try this out. Now we also want to make sure that when we hit a certain point we go back. Now the good news here is that because we're going back to the world, we can use ODS plugin. We can actually use the travel to map actor. So I think I'm going to actually move this. We'll end up adjusting it later. So this one's the travel to map actor. And let's see, we'll try the same thing. 15, 1, 10. Oh, that's okay. We can rotate. And we want to make sure that this goes to our world 2. That was the other side that we were on. And we'll make sure to move our character over to there. We don't know the location on the map yet. We don't know the other. We're only interested in these because we're not using the dynamic spawning. It's just going to go to a certain point. Let's fix this one. So I'm coming here, right click, copy, back to our world map under world comp. I'm pasting it in the dungeon spawn point. Perfect. And now I need to do the same thing here as well. Now you'll notice the world's not, when you come back you have to load these. There we go. And so we'll go back to unlit. I want to make sure that I come back over here. So I'm going to add an empty right about here. That's where I want to come out at. And I'm going to copy the location, save, and go back to our first dungeon. Yep. And click on this, and here's the location on the map that we want to go back to. So we're using the ODS Travel to Map BP. That works perfectly fine to go back to a world map. So we're using that to go this way. And then to go into it, we built the new portal to dungeon instance. Okay. So let's go back over here. And we want to go to our characters. And you'll remember we're using Future 3. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come in to edit this character. Change it. I think you might be on our world 1. You want to change it to our world 2. So you're on the other side there. And then what you want to do is probably the same values that are right here. Maybe just have that be now for testing where you start. So grab these values here. And come in here. And we'll move those over. Control C. Okay. And remember to change it to our world 2, which is that other side of the zone, because remember our world's split into 2 sections there. Okay, so we got that. We got this. Okay, so now we got to come back over here, and we need the RPG World server running. So I've told a lot of people that if you can't get the RPG World server running, you can run everything except video 9. I meant to mention at the start of this video, I think I'll put it in the description, this one also requires it. So you now have to skip video 9 and whatever number this one's going to be. So I'm going to grab this and throw it on the other screen. I'm hitting Start Server, Test Connection to Management Server. And now I want to come back here and I want to uncheck Run Dedicated Server. Right? But first, before we do that, I want to actually test this out. So I also want to grab this empty again, hit copy. And I want to go into our game mode. and I want to paste it as the debug start location. Because if we run it in here, that's what it's going to use. And so I'm going to come back over here, make sure run dedicated servers checked. I'm on this world. Load these in, so it would have loaded it otherwise. And we're using play and editor. I hit play. Awesome. Loaded me in here. Anyway, we haven't done the other. If I walk forward there, it's not going to work. Because we're not using RPG World server, we're using the server on here, and we're not logged in, so it's not going to work. Also, the other problem is that when we do the login screen, if we do play an editor, the landscape won't load. So what we got to do is we got to come in here and uncheck run dedicated server. Okay? And then we want to use standalone game. I also want to have the output loading here. So we're going to hit standalone game. There's a problem. Let's close this. Yeah. Okay. Before I do that, I also have to switch. So if you're running in the world, you want dedicated server checked. If you're running the login level, you want it unchecked. And so we're running the login level, so we want it unchecked. Go back to output log. So we got to start on the login level. Whenever that's unchecked, an RPG World server has to be running if it's unchecked. Which it is. It's sitting on the other screen. So test for demo test.com. And Future 3 is the one that we're using. So let's give this a try and see how it works. Oh no. Ah ha 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 ha. Okay. So, here's what happened. 4.2. You're going to want to go into the config to change this, because otherwise anything you type in here is going to get lost. But I'm going to do this temporarily. So apparently we have not tested it since 4.20, and we're now on 4.21. Let's give it a try again. The path to dedicated server while we're developing here is actually the path to the editor, and it's what editor it's going to use. And it has to match our project version. Back to Future 3. And select character, and we should get, there we go. Now we got an instance. I'm just dragging it off to the other screen, so it's not in our way. Yay. Okay, so it loaded us where we wanted to. And now, if I walk forward, what should happen is that we should get a loading screen. And another instance should load for our, if it's working right, which it may not, we'll see. Okay, it loaded, that's a good sign. It said that it loaded our first dungeon. Oh, look at this. So that'll take us back. Anyway, all the colors are all messed up here, but we are now in a dungeon instance for our player group. So our player group now owns this. People not in our player group won't come here, unlike the world ones, where it just looks to see if there's room and anybody can join them. Yeah, sweet. So now we're going to see if we can get back to the main world. And we can. Oh, there it is. It's like, wait, where's our landscape? Anyway, we'll fill out the rest. In between videos, I'm going to go build the rest of the cave, make it look a little bit nicer. You guys can do some more work on that as well. Also, look, there's some stuff that's not lining up there nicely, so we'll adjust the rocks and make it look better. And but there you go. We now have our first dungeon instance. Now in the future, what we'll do, one of the items on the list is to build a full-blown party menu, build a friends list, and so we'll keep adding to this so that we have more functionality. We're going to look at some more gameplay ability stuff. We're going to look at showing damage on screen. You'll notice there's 2 new events. On on take damage and on inflict damage, so we'll use those. Maybe the next video, we'll see. And if you guys have any other things you want me to look into, let me know in the comments. And until next time, see ya.